Today, we're talking about one of the biggest challenges dental practices face, managing insurance fees without allowing insurance companies to control the financial health of the practice. Many practice owners assume fee schedules are fixed, negotiations are impossible, and insurance write-downs are simply part of doing business. But practices may have more opportunities to negotiate, strengthen their systems, and protect their revenue than they realize. Joining us today is Tessina Bullock, who specializes in helping dental practices understand insurance, train their teams, and confidently fight back against the systems that quietly reduce profitability. Now, this episode is brought to you by Equa Marketing, the digital growth partner behind this podcast, and a trusted resource for dental practices looking to strengthen their online presence and reduce the dependence on PPOs. Let's explore what dental practices need to know about fee negotiations and taking back control. Now, Cecina, many dental practice owners believe insurance fees are non negotiable. Is that always true? And what should practices understand before starting the negotiation process?
Yes, Angie, thank you so much for having me today. I'm super excited to go over these topics. Like you mentioned, it is a big topic.
Mhm.
And I usually don't correct my name, but because it's on the podcast, it is Tessina. And
Oh,
I get Tessina all the time. So I'm really not even bothered by it. But
I'm so
yeah,
sorry for that.
no, don't be sorry at all. I think that's a great conversation to have on the podcast because
Yeah.
everywhere that my name gets splashed around, everybody's like, is it Tessina? Is it Tessina? Like, what is it? So, yeah, it's a good conversation to have as well. But yeah, a fun thing about my name before we get into that, it was my sister's imaginary friend. So everybody always asks, like, where did that even come from? And I'm like, literally so made up. It's not even funny. So yeah, that's been fun. It's been good for me. I adopted a concept of, like I don't have a identity crisis is what I tell people, right? I know who I
Yeah.
am, and a rose by any other name is still a rose, right? So I take that into like all my consulting stuff as well. I think it's super helpful for offices to know who they are and what quality of service they provide, right? And not letting the insurance company dictate that by mispronouncing it. So, okay, to answer your question, you were saying that offices believe that insurance companies don't negotiate that. And that
Mhm.
is a very common misconception. It happens because offices are reaching out to insurance companies kind of just with a phone call or sometimes with a letter just saying, hey, do you negotiate? And they get a quick rebuttal that says, nope, we don't negotiate. What you get is what you get. But that's not true. And that's not accurate information. Insurance companies definitely are negotiating. But first, like, what happens is that the negotiations start way before that phone call of, can I negotiate? So it's really important to make sure that you understand that process, that negotiations and getting higher reimbursement rates start well before a phone call. You need to make sure your office fees are current. Are you billing out your office fees on all of your claims instead of the contracted rate, right? What contracts are negotiable, well, and that's hard for them to decide, right? But learning and understanding this might need extra level help. But trying to learn which companies do negotiate versus which ones strictly do not negotiate. That would be some government plans that where the fee schedule is set by the government. So they're less likely to negotiate. Another thing is making sure you know what leverage your practice has. We can get into that another topic, but there's a lot of different things that can create leverage for the practice. And then lastly, like, are you talking to the right person? Just calling in and asking any low level rep, do you negotiate? They're literally trained with their rebuttal to say no, because at a lot of times the question and the whole conversation ends right there and the office gives up, not knowing who to even talk to. So if practices are skipping those steps, then they conclude that insurance companies do not negotiate. But if they go through those steps, then that preparation determines the success of those negotiations. Does that answer your question?
Of course, I like you said, I think this is a big topic, and many of our listeners are probably very, very curious on this topic. So, if you don't mind, can you share an example of a practice that discovered it had more negotiating leverage than expected?
Oh, yes. Well, and I mean, obviously, I can't pinpoint a practice, but I can tell you, I work nationwide with hundreds of thousands of offices, and that
Mhm.
is what we do: is we go in and find that leverage and find those negotiation opportunities, and they are there. So practices are making, and it's not like I wouldn't expect crazy amounts. We're not expecting something like a 50% increase on production, right? But even something as small as a 7% increase on production is actually huge for a practice on a day-to-day level.
How should the owner decide whether a plan is worth negotiating with, though?
Yes, that is a huge topic. That is a huge question. This has to be a non-emotional assessment. We can't get into this habit of saying, like, oh, I love Susan who comes to our practice, and I'm afraid if I drop that insurance plan or negotiate that insurance plan, that will negatively affect her. So surprisingly, it's surprising to me, but surprisingly to you, maybe, and some of these offices, they want higher reimbursement rates, but they are concerned about using up the patient's maximum faster, or they are concerned about the patient having higher out-of-pocket costs. However, that is the natural outcome of getting a higher reimbursement rate or being able to collect what is needed for your overhead. So we can't go around, making or not making these decisions based on fear of how we might be potentially negatively affecting patients. And we're really not negatively affecting the patients. What we're doing is correctly assessing and being correctly paid for what the value is, what the worth is of our quality dentistry. If we go to the grocery store and the milk and the eggs are so much more than we remember them being, that's not necessarily like, and nobody loves it, but it's not any one person's fault. This is the economy we're in. Everybody is trying to collect what they need to collect for those services or those supplies, right? And so that's out of our control. If the cost of doing good quality dentistry has gone up, then that has to be covered. That has to be paid for so that we can continue to provide that good quality dentistry. And I have a lot of doctors that want to do a lot of charity work. And we have to remind them that if you want to have the means to give charity dentistry, then you have to first be not losing money on your day-to-day business.
That makes it very clear. That is, I mean, that's such a great answer, actually. Now, next up, I want to know what information should a dental practice gather before requesting a fee increase, and what can make a negotiation more successful?
Yes, this is huge. Again, getting that preparation, a non-emotional assessment. That's what we're building. You're going to be building your profile, let's say. So that requires you gathering those current office fees and making sure that they are within the range for your market. I am still finding thousands of offices across the nation are actually undercharging for their area. And this furthers the problem of those reimbursement rates being driven down. So gather your current office fee schedules. Again, make sure that they're the appropriate range for your area. Gather your most frequently billed procedures. In negotiations with insurance companies, they will do, and many offices can attest to this. They'll give you an increase on codes you don't even bill or use and decrease codes that you actually are using. And they say, but we gave you an overall increase. And that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for a targeted increase on the codes that we bill, the codes that we use. So in order to request that, you need to know what that is. So gather that list of your frequently billed procedures and the corresponding downgrade codes for those crowns and fillings. That needs to be targeted as well. Otherwise, you're going to get an increase on the upgrade service and not an increase on the downgrade. We're still seeing about 40% of all claims are downgraded. So if you are not negotiating those downgraded codes, you have not increased your reimbursement rate. So aside from that, okay, sorry, I got side, so current office fees, and then your most frequently billed fees or procedures. And then the next is calculating what companies are your biggest write-offs. Where are you losing the most money? Those are the insurance companies we need to evaluate the strongest. Again, non-emotional. That might be Susan's insurance plan, and we love Susan. But if it is the company that is causing us the most write-offs, then it may not be the best business decision to continue with that if they do not negotiate. You need to know the date that you joined the PPO, because insurance companies will negotiate every 2 years. And so if you have recently signed on and like purchasing a practice and you just signed on and got credentialed, you may not be due for negotiations. So that's something to keep in mind. And then something that is a big topic right now is understanding your contracts. There's a direct contract and there's an umbrella contract or a third-party leasing agreement. And if you don't know and understand how those plans interact with each other, then you're not going to have successful negotiations. Or if you choose to finally get to that spot where you choose to drop a plan because it's not a good business relationship, you may be finding out that you're not actually dropping it. You're just moving it to a different network. And that could actually be a lower network than what you had before. So getting organized, making sure you know what those relationships are is going to be really important. That's very difficult to do, but it can be done. You might need expert level help, but if you wanted to do it on your own, you could start with trying to ask the insurance companies for the networks that they lease to or lease from. And then, sorry, we're getting down to it. There's a lot that you need to gather. You also need to make sure that you have the right contact. Again, we kind of talked about this before. Just calling that low-level rep is not always going to equal in successful negotiations. You want to get to the network retention specialists or the network recruiters. Those people are in charge of negotiating those contracts to make sure that you don't leave the network, which is also some of your leverage, is being willing and ready to leave that network if needed. Being mindful about group practices or how many providers you have, that is also part of leverage. So anybody that has multiple providers or multiple locations has greater leverage to get better reimbursements. But you need to draw that attention to the insurance company, even though they know they're not going to willingly say, oh, you have so many providers, let's get you a negotiation. If they can get away with it, they will. You have to bring it to their attention that you have this larger network. You have more providers and more locations. Therefore, you require a better reimbursement rate. This is how DSOs, they use their leverage as well because they're large DSOs. There is also something called IPA, where it's individual practitioner associations. Not all areas have them, but it would be really important to look into that for your area to know if there's any IPAs available. That is for individual practices to join an association to get access to that group negotiation structure or group vendor discounts while maintaining their individual ownership. So once you have all of those items ready, then you're ready to start your negotiations, and that preparation changes the outcome.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. Now, of course, protecting practice profitability requires more than accepting whatever an insurance company offers. If you're listening and realizing that your practice may be too dependent on insurance-driven patients, book a complimentary marketing strategy meeting with Equa Marketing at insuranceuntangled.com/MSM. The team can review your website, SEO, online visibility, local competition, and opportunities to attract more of the right patients. Once again, insuranceuntangled.com/MSM. That's where you can book a complimentary marketing strategy meeting with Equa Marketing. All right, now bringing that back to today's conversation, attracting the right patients is only one part of protecting profitability. Practices also need stronger internal systems for, managing insurance. Tessina, did I say that right this time?
Tessina.
Tessina, all right.
It's fine.
So, Sina, you often say that dental offices should manage insurances rather than allowing insurance companies to train the office. What does that mean, and where are practices most often giving away control?
Yes, this is huge. So we're putting in the front desk individuals who are not trained in dentistry and definitely not trained in insurance. There's not a ton of courses out there that even offer those trainings. It really is best to reach out and find dental courses or consulting groups that specialize in those kind of admin trainings. Otherwise, what happens is because that individual doesn't know how the insurance companies works, what those rules are, they learn by calling the insurance companies and asking those questions. Well, how do we do this? What do we do? What are my rules? And the insurance company works for the insurance company. So they are designed to protect their systems and their business. And they are going to teach your staff how to, let's say, how do I say this? Politically correct. The insurance company is going to train your team in favor of the insurance company's policies of what they would like and not what is standard of care or what is in the best interest of your practice and your patients. So some examples of where this happens is those denials. Sometimes these denials or bundling or those types of things come through and offices call the insurance company says, yep, that's how it is. That's how our contract is. You don't have any options, when really you do. So it's super important. I want offices to learn and understand, review their contracts, understand their legal rights and protections through their state and federal departments, and understand their options before they are making these business decisions. Not only what insurance companies do we take, but what denials do we allow? What level of bullying do we allow? You should be standing up to these insurance companies, reporting them to the proper authorities if they are not processing claims correctly. And oh, there was something I was thinking and I just lost my train of thought. So stand up for yourself, advocate for yourself, for your practice, and for your patients. But learning those laws, learning those rights is going to be key in that, so that the insurance company can't say to you, yeah, that's how it is. You say, I know it's not, and I will report you if you try to do that.
What is usually the first system that you correct when training a practice?
Yeah, something big is and simple is just the attachments that we send on the initial claims. It's such a simple thing, but what has happened over time is insurance companies will say, we have to have 10 different levels of documentation for these claims to be paid. And so I see offices like killing themselves to get all of this documentation and try to prove that the work needed to be done. Basically going to the insurance company and saying, can you please approve this? Can you please allow payment? This service needed to be done. Instead of realizing that the law states that insurance companies have to pay those claims in good faith. Right? Our responsibility and the legal side that the insurance company takes advantage of is that we do have to provide sufficient evidence that the work was required so that offices cannot falsely bill claims. That is being abused to the max. So where insurance companies have you sending an entire, 5-page book to get a claim paid. And that is not how it is designed. And that is not what the law states. So you should be sending one x-ray, one line narrative, and that should be all that is necessary to show sufficient evidence that the work needed to be done. The insurance company is not allowed to diagnose treatment or dictate treatment. That is against the law. So you should be standing up for yourself and making sure that you're sending good documentation. That x-ray should be a really good x-ray. But as long as it shows that there was work there that needed to be done and your narrative supports why it went to the level of a crown instead of a filling, then that is all that you need. That is your sufficient evidence. And the insurance company is required to pay that claim.
Speaking of which, even with excellent preparations, there will be situations where the insurance company still says no. So, if an insurance company refuses to increase its fees, what other steps can a practice take to reduce write-downs, protect revenue, and fight back without immediately leaving the network?
Yeah, it always seems like we're fighting with the insurance companies. And I'd like to rephrase that a little bit and saying like that there's a miscommunication between the offices and between the insurance companies. Insurance companies think and know, think that the offices know what they need. And we don't. Nobody, that's not being taught properly. So I think that sometimes the answer is in or switching the conversation over, right? It's not that it's over, but it's changing. Changing the conversation. Sometimes that's improving your office fees, correcting the unnecessary write-offs, meaning we appeal for when those denials come through, not just giving up and writing it off, and reevaluating, more importantly, whether or not that PPO still makes sense from a business relationship aspect. And there's a lot of fear behind leaving the network, right? And that's, again, this fighting back or leaving the network. But we really need to stop and assess, is this a good business relationship? Is this plan supporting the quality level of dentistry clinically that I like to provide for my patients? And if it is not, then it might be a good time to leave that network and look for other options, right? Making sure that dentists don't realize the influence that they have, right? So we talk about the leverage that the insurance companies have. I've been trying to talk about the leverage that the dental offices have. Insurance companies need strong provider networks to sell their products. When practices thoughtfully evaluate their contracts instead of automatically renewing them year after year, the market begins to respond. Another option many independent dentists don't realize exists is joining those IPA organizations that I had mentioned previously. So, an IPA allows independent practices to remain independently owned while, when structured appropriately, can create opportunities similar to those DSOs or larger groups with negotiations and also lowering that overhead. So every IPA is different. I have to be careful in saying that not every area has one, but if you're not sure whether or not there's an IPA available or what you should be looking at, you can certainly reach out to us. That's another avenue, or researching how to use those umbrella networks. There's a lot of opportunities you have for that leverage, for the restructuring of plans, for those higher reimbursement rates without just leaving the network. But also, don't be afraid to leave the network if you need to leave the network. If it's not a good relationship, that is an okay place to be. And the more that each office decides what is best for them, the more things will change. So everybody's like, how do we get this change? We're complaining. Every time you sign that contract, every time you renew that contract with those insurance companies, you are supporting that insurance company saying, we're happy with your contract. So if you're not happy with the contract and the insurance company is not changing that contract, then the way that you show them you're unhappy is to leave. Does that make sense? That's a long
Yes.
answer. Does that answer?
No, but it was great. It was so clear and it's such great insight. Now, fee negotiations are not just about asking for higher reimbursements. They're about understanding the practice's numbers, reviewing contracts carefully, training the team, and making informed decisions about insurance participation. Practices that protect their profitability are the ones that stop treating insurance as something they cannot control and begin actively managing it as a part of their business strategy.
Yes.
Now, before we close, I would love to know, what is the one takeaway you would like every dental practice owner listening today to remember?
Yeah, I think my key takeaway would be stop letting fear drive your decisions. Make those non-emotional assessments, build your practice profile, understand what your practice needs and what type of high quality dentistry you are providing, and then make the decisions that will promote that to allow you to continue to provide good quality dentistry.
Thank you so much again for joining us today and for sharing such practical, honest insights. I think you've given dental practices a much clearer understanding of how they can approach insurance with greater confidence, protect their revenue, and also make more informed decisions for the future of their practice. Now, if today's conversation resonated with you, visit insuranceuntangled.com/resources and download the episode guide for this session. And if you're ready to attract more ideal patients, strengthen your online visibility, and reduce your dependence on insurance, book a complimentary marketing strategy meeting with Echo Marketing at insuranceuntangled.com/MSM. Sina, thank you so much for joining us and sharing such practical insights with our listeners. And to everyone listening, don't simply accept what insurance companies offer. Understand your options, strengthen your systems, and take back control. So thank you for listening to Insurance Untangled. We'll see you in the next episode.